Hello, everyone. Tonight's story will gently guide you into a peaceful slumber, one soft word at a time. As you listen, allow your mind to let go of the day, feel your breath slow, and sink deeper into your pillow. This tale is woven with mystery, calm, and a whisper of ancient secrets, told just for you. So if you enjoy relaxing bedtime stories like this one, don't forget to click follow, tap the little bell, so you never miss a new night's tale. And let's drift together into the world of dreams. Now, let us begin. Long ago, in a kingdom so high above the clouds, it was almost always hidden from view, there stood a palace with rooftops like gold-dusted silk and walls made of sun-warmed stone. The people called it the Palace of Clouds because on most mornings, the mist hugged its courtyards and spilled like a soft river down its marble steps. The air smelled of lavender and rain. The breeze was gentle and slow, as though even the wind knew to whisper in such a sacred place. This palace had belonged to many emperors, but none were as curious and quiet as Emperor Lian. Unlike other rulers who wore their power like heavy robes, Lian preferred bare feet and long walks in the moonlight. He was a gentle man with a calm voice and a curious heart. He asked more questions than he gave orders, and he listened more than he spoke. What made Emperor Lian so beloved by his people wasn't just his fairness or kindness. It was something much more mysterious. He never seemed tired, even after long nights spent reading ancient scrolls or walking the gardens under stars. His eyes were always clear, his mind always steady, and his smile always soft. The palace doctors could not explain it, and his advisors only whispered about it behind thick wooden doors. They called it the Emperor's night magic, and though no one dared ask, many wondered what his secret truly was. As the years passed, the mystery only deepened. Emperors aged, even the kind ones. But Lin's face remained untouched by time. The same calm rested in his shoulders and voice. The only one who seemed to know the truth was the old chamberlain, Master Jin Hai, a man with hair as white as jasmine petals and hands that moved as slow as clouds. He had served 3 emperors before Lian, and yet he remained, always just a few steps behind the young ruler, holding silence like a secret he would never share. Until one day, something changed. It was the first full moon of the 12th year of Lian's reign. A moon so round and bright, it painted silver on every surface of the palace. Lian stood on the eastern balcony, gazing across the gardens where lanterns floated like sleepy stars. A soft rustling behind him made him turn, and there stood Jin Hai, older now, slower than ever, but his eyes held the same steady light. "Majesty," he said, his voice as gentle as falling leaves, "there is something I must show you. It is time." Lian raised an eyebrow. "Time for what?" "For you to understand the gift you are given," said Jin Hai, "and how it may one day be passed on." Without another word, the old man turned and began walking down a long hallway seldom used. Lian followed, silent, curious. They passed rooms draped in velvet and gold, corridors lined with scrolls, through doors older than memory, until they reached a narrow stairway behind a tapestry of plum blossoms. Down they went, past stone that smelled of moss and candle wax, until they reached a door made of dark cedar, carved with the shapes of sleeping animals, tigers curled beside sparrows, deer nestled beside lions, all at peace. Jin Hai pressed his palm to the door and whispered words too soft to hear. The door opened without a sound. Inside was a chamber that seemed forgotten by time. Shelves of tiny clay jars lined the walls, each labeled in handwriting that looked centuries old. A copper cauldron sat at the center of the room, its sides darkened by years of use. The air smelled faintly of chamomile, rose, and something deeper earthy and sweet. "This," Jin Hai said quietly, "is the room of the Sleep Elixir. And this, my emperor, is your secret." Lian stepped inside slowly. The walls seemed to hum with stillness. "You mean I've been drinking something all these years? Jinhai smiled gently. Not without your choosing. You were told it was a tea for clear thoughts and gentle dreams, which it is. But it is more. It is a potion crafted by the wisdom of 10 emperors before you, a blend of nature and patience. And now, you must learn how it is made. Lian walked to the shelves, brushing his fingers over jars labeled moonroot, velvet fig, sky lily, and whisper bark. Each name felt like poetry, soft syllables that made the air around them feel even more still. Jinhai began to teach. One herb for slowing breath, another for calming the mind, one to ease the weight of memory, another to open the gates to dreams. They ground dried petals with polished stones. They heated the mixture slowly, never boiling, just warming as if by sunlight. Jinhai showed him how to wait, how to breathe with the leaves, how to whisper to the roots. Night after night, they returned. The elixir was never made quickly. That was part of the secret. It took time, attention, and silence. And when it was done, it was only never more than a small ceramic cup full. But the dreams it brought were vast and deep and filled with quiet. Lian began to understand that the potion did not give sleep, but invited it. It did not erase worries, but taught the mind to lay them down like stones beside a stream. One evening, after weeks of preparation, Jinhai placed the final pinch of crushed petal into the cup and handed it to Lian. "Drink," he said, "and listen carefully." Lian sipped. The taste was delicate and warm. He felt the hush come over his mind like the gentle closing of a window. "In this elixir," Jinhai said softly, "is the wisdom of every emperor who ever truly learned how to rest. Not just at night, but in the heart. In the middle of chaos, in the quiet before dawn. The real secret, my emperor, is not the potion. It is the listening, the making, the stillness it teaches." Lian nodded slowly, feeling the truth settle into him like a feather landing in soft grass. And so began the emperor's journey into deeper sleep, not only of the body, but of the soul. Each night became a ritual. The making of the elixir, the listening to its silence, the sipping of stillness. The emperor slept not to escape the world, but to remember it more clearly. And the more he slept this way, the more his people found peace, as though his dreams were large enough to hold them all. But the story, of course, doesn't end there. For this is only the beginning of the journey, a journey that will span forests of nightshade, mountains that whisper, and a village that remembers dreams. But we'll leave those for the next night. Now, close your eyes. Let the emperor's calm guide your breath, and may your own dreams be as gentle as moonlight on a still pond. The first time Emperor Lian mentioned the name of the village aloud, it was as if he had plucked it from the folds of a forgotten dream. The words barely formed on his lips before a wind stirred the silk banners in his chamber, as though the air itself recognized the name and longed to respond. That village, Jinhai said, was once called Mixiang, meaning fragrant memory. It lay far beyond the palace grounds, across slow rivers and winding hills, nestled in a valley hidden by mist. No map in the royal library marked its location, and few in the kingdom even remembered it existed. But it had been real once, and Lian was sure it still was. Mixiang, as Jinhai explained, was once the place where the first ingredients for the sleep elixir had been discovered. A place where people listened to dreams as if they were stories told by the stars, where every herb was picked with intention, and even silence had a language of its own. The old chamberlain had not been there in many decades. He spoke of it with a softness in his voice, like someone describing a lullaby remembered from childhood. One morning, before the sun had fully climbed above the trees, Lian set off in disguise. He wore simple robes the color of sand and kept his hair tied loosely. He carried no fanfare, no servants, only a satchel containing a single ceramic cup, 2 small scrolls, and a pouch of dried moonroot just enough to make one final cup of the elixir if he needed it. Jinhai had remained behind, whispering, "You must go alone. Mingxiang only shows itself to those who truly seek it." And so Lian walked. He passed through villages where the people bowed politely, not recognizing their emperor in the quiet traveler with thoughtful eyes. He helped an old woman carry water, shared stories with a child beneath a willow tree, and listened to the wind rustle through bamboo as he slept under the stars. Days passed like slow-moving clouds. The landscape changed gently. Hills became slopes, trees taller and quieter. And then one afternoon, as he walked a trail marked only by deer prints, Lian heard a sound that stopped him in his tracks. It was a bell. Not the sharp clang of metal on stone, but a soft, ringing chime, like porcelain struck with silk. It rang once, then again, echoing faintly between the trees. Lian followed it. The forest thickened, the trail narrowed, and then, without warning, it opened. There it was, Mingxiang. The village was smaller than he imagined, no more than 20 or 30 homes, each one built from smooth wood and roofed with green-tiled shingles that glinted like jade in the light. A stream meandered through its center, slow and clear, and footbridges arched over it like the backs of sleeping cats. Everywhere there were flowers, strange ones he did not recognize, growing in neat rows and wild corners alike. The air carried their scent, light and warm and entirely unfamiliar. But the most striking thing was the people. They moved slowly, not out of weariness, but as if time held no urgency here. Children laughed in whispers. Elders sipped tea in silence. And all of them, each and every one, looked at Lian, not with surprise, but with gentle recognition, as though they had been waiting. An old woman approached, her silver hair plaited in long braids, her eyes the color of dusk. She bowed deeply. "Welcome home," she said, her voice like falling petals. I am not sure I belong here," Lian replied softly. "Everyone forgets where they came from," she said with a smile. "But dreams always remember." She led him to a house at the edge of the village, where the door creaked open with the sound of old memories. Inside, everything smelled of cedar and rain. She poured him tea made of herbs that shimmered slightly in the cup, as though caught halfway between wakefulness and sleep. They spoke little. Instead, she hummed a tune he somehow knew, though he could not say from where. That night, he slept on a mat beneath an open window. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and distant bells sang softly to the moon. Lian dreamed of rivers running backward, of clouds that whispered his name, of a voice, Jinhai's voice, saying, "The potion is not the answer. It is the invitation." He awoke just before dawn. The old woman was already in the garden, her hands buried in the soil, tending to plants that swayed as if stretching. "You dreamed," she said without looking up. "I did," Lian replied, "and I remembered something. Yes, that is what this village is for." In the days that followed, Lian learned the ways of Mingxiang. The villagers taught him how to listen for herbs before picking them, to wait for the moment when a flower bowed toward him ever so slightly. They taught him that dreams must be honored in waking life, that silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of understanding. There was one herb, however, that Lian had never seen before, a tiny, star-shaped blossom with petals that shimmered in the dusk light. It was called hushleaf, and it only bloomed once every 7 years. "You are just in time," the old woman told him. "Without hushleaf, the potion cannot complete itself. But it must be picked only at twilight, and only if you have listened carefully to the dreams of others." So Lian waited. He listened. Each night, he sat with a different villager as they told him dreams. Some were joyful, some strange, and some quietly sorrowful. One man dreamed of a brother he lost in childhood, who returned each night to finish building a wooden oat. A girl dreamed of a bird who gave her riddles in exchange for feathers. An elder woman dreamed of the sea, though she had never left the mountains. Lian listened, and slowly the dream shaped him. One evening, just as the last light slipped beneath the valley, the hush leaf began to bloom. Lian approached it slowly, breathing deeply, remembering the stories he had heard, the lives he had touched, the calm he had found in silence. The flower turned its tiny head toward him, and its petals opened like a sigh. He picked it gently, placed it in a silk pouch, and bowed to the earth. That night, the old woman brewed a new version of the elixir. It had hush leaf now, and the dreams of the entire village steeped inside it. When Lian sipped it, it tasted like rain on warm stone, like lullabies carried on the wind. He closed his eyes, and this time he did not dream of answers. He dreamed of questions. And in the softness of that dreaming, something shifted. Not just in him, but in the world around him. The potion's true power, he realized, was never in sleep. It was in remembering how to see the world gently, how to let it move slowly, how to allow stillness to be sacred. As the moon rose high above Mixiang, Emperor Lian slept peacefully, held not by magic, but by memory, mystery, and the quiet company of those who never forgot the language of dreams.
When Emperor Lian returned to the Palace of Clouds, the world felt quieter, as though his time in Mixiang had tuned his senses to a softer frequency. The colors of the palace were warmer, the sounds of footsteps on marble more measured, the sigh of trees in the garden more musical than before. The hush leaf lay dried in a carved cedar box, its petals pale and crisp like folded starlight. The people of the court noticed the difference in him. He spoke more slowly. He paused more often. When he looked at someone, it was with a stillness that made them feel both seen and safe. He no longer hurried through affairs of state, nor did he worry when things took their time. It was as if a deeper kind of patience had rooted itself within him. But he did not rest on silence alone. One misty morning, while walking beneath the canopy of plum blossoms, Lian entered the royal archive. It was a place few visited unless they sought answers. Lian sought questions. The stone hall was long and cool, filled with scrolls stacked like sleeping birds, wrapped in faded silk and scented with age. As he walked among them, one scroll seemed to call out not with sound, but with stillness. It was tucked beneath others, bound with a black ribbon. Its title faded to a ghost. He brought it to the reading chamber, unrolled it carefully, and found himself staring at words written in a style older than the empire itself. The script curved and floated across the page like drifting clouds. The title read, "The Scroll of Silent Winds. The First Emperor's Dream." The first lines told the story of Emperor Lian, a ruler of legend whose name was rarely spoken but always remembered in the bones of the palace. It was said he had built the empire not by conquering armies, but by learning how to listen to the wind. The scroll described how Lian had vanished one night from his chambers, leaving behind only a cup of tea still warm and a single feather of a bird, not known to any scholar. For years people searched, but Lian was never found. Some said he had walked into a dream so deep he never came back. Others said the wind had taught him how to leave the world without leaving a trace. Lian read deeper. The scroll was not a history. It was a meditation. It spoke of dreams as landscapes, of sleep as a bridge between truth and mystery. It explained that the wind, in its gentleness, carried more wisdom than any scroll, and if one listened not. With ears, but with the quiet space between thoughts, one could hear the wind speak. That night Lian left his windows open. He lay on his side, a candle flickering beside him, and closed his eyes not to sleep, but to listen. Outside, the wind danced through the plum blossoms, catching their petals and carrying them in swirls across the courtyard. It touched the chimes and made them ring like distant laughter. It rustled the silk curtains and whispered along the papered walls. At first, there were no words, only motion. But slowly, over hours that passed like drifting clouds, the wind began to take shape. Not in speech, but in sensation. It told of distant places where sleep came hard and dreams harder still. Of cities where the stars were hidden behind smoke and people forgot the names of their own hearts. Told of a child who had never seen the moon. of an old man who had not spoken in years but still sang in his sleep. It told of a river that remembered every footprint ever made along its shore. Lian lay still. He let the wind braid stories through his breath. And when morning came, he felt not tired, but deeply full, like a vessel that had carried 1,000 stories through the night. The next day he called for parchment. But instead of writing decrees, he began to record the wind. He wrote not in sentences, but in rhythms. Phrases that followed breath, thoughts that curled around silence. The scribes did not know what to make of it. They watched the emperor write with closed eyes, pausing often, as though listening to something they could not hear. Soon he had written 30 scrolls. He called them the Book of Gentle Hours. He placed them not in the library, but in the gardens, under open pavilions, where visitors could read them only when the wind chose to turn their pages. It became a ritual. Villagers and nobles alike would visit, waiting patiently for the breeze to lift a scroll and reveal a line or two. Some sat all day for a single sentence, and often that one line was enough. One scroll read, asterisk, close your eyes, not to sleep, but to remember how to be still. Another, asterisk, the leaf does not resist the wind, and so it flies farther than any wing. And another still, asterisk, dreams do not belong to sleep, they belong to the part of you that never forgets how to listen. People began to carry those phrases in their hearts. The palace became known not just for its beauty, but for its quiet. Traders who passed through left calmer than they arrived. Birds nested in its rafters without fear. Children of servants played without shrieking. Even the dogs learned to walk softly. One afternoon, as Lian walked beneath a bridge of trailing vines, a young girl approached him. She held out a small leaf with a phrase written in delicate ink. "Did you write this?" she asked. Lian took the leaf and read the words, asterisk, the moon never hurries, and yet she always arrives. He smiled gently. "I heard it," he said, "and then I remembered it." The girl beamed. "I want to remember things too." "Then start by listening," he said. "Not to me, but to the space between the sounds." The girl closed her eyes. And in that moment, the breeze stirred, lifting a single blossom into the air, carrying it across the path. The emperor watched her breathe with it, still and open. And he knew the dream was growing. That night, when he drank his cup of sleep elixir, he didn't dream of palaces or scrolls or silence. He dreamed of the girl, grown older, standing in a distant place, whispering something soft into the ear of a child who would one day dream even farther than she had. And as the wind rustled through the room, the emperor smiled in his sleep, not because he had found peace, but because he had shared it.
It was sometime in the 5th month after his return that Emperor Lian began to dream of a place he had never seen, though it felt entirely familiar. A garden cloaked in darkness, not from shadow, but from quiet. No moonlight reached it. No footsteps disturbed it. The air was thick with jasmine, and something else, something like memory, folded into moss. In the dream, he stood alone in this garden, and though he could not see the sky, he felt watched, not in fear, but with a sense of deep attention, like the garden itself was awake and listening. Each night, the dream returned, always the same, always silent, until one night, just before waking, he heard a soft chime. A bell, small and round, not rung with force, but breathed into resonance. Its tone lingered in the air like fog on water, and then faded. When he woke, his hands trembled slightly. He stood on the eastern balcony as the first light touched the clouds, and Jinhai appeared behind him, as quiet as ever, holding a clay cup. "Did you hear it?" Lian asked without turning. "The bell?" Jinhai replied, setting the cup down. "Yes, at last." They said nothing for a while. Finally, the emperor spoke again. "What is it?" Jinhai folded his hands, his gaze soft. "It is called the Bell of Stillness. It rings only for those who have carried silence long enough that the world begins to respond. You have reached a threshold. There is a garden beneath the palace that very few know exists. It opens only to those who are ready. And it is time?" Lian followed the old man through halls dim with morning, down past fountains and into corridors whose doors bore no handles. They reached a wall with no seams. Jinhai placed his palm against it, and slowly, as if remembering how to move, the stone receded, revealing a spiral stair descending into darkness. They stepped down into cool earth, the air growing richer with every step. At the bottom, the light returned not from torches or lanterns, but from the garden itself. Bioluminescent petals glowed in soft hues, blues and greens and gentle purples. The trees were silver-veined, their bark pulsing like breath. A stream ran through it, quiet and steady, and hovering above the water, as though suspended in thought, was the bell. It was smaller than Lian imagined, no more than a palm's width across, cast from a metal that shimmered like starlight in mist. It did not swing. It simply existed, unmoving, untouched, but full of sound waiting to happen. Jinghai stepped back. "This garden listens," he said. "You may not speak here unless it is in dreams." So the emperor sat. He spent the entire day beneath the glimmering canopy, saying nothing, not even in thought. His breath matched the movement of the stream. His eyes adjusted to the soft pulse of the light. His mind stopped chasing meaning and began to rest inside it. Hours passed, and then, just as twilight kissed the tips of the highest glowing leaves, the bell chimed. Just once. The sound was not loud. It was wide. It stretched through the room like a sigh remembered from childhood. It curved around Lian's body, wrapping itself gently around his thoughts, dissolving tension he didn't know he carried. And in its wake came not answers, but release. He slept, right there on the mossy bank of the stream, with the bell floating above him. He dreamed of the wind again, but this time it wasn't whispering. It was humming, soft and low, like a lullaby hummed without melody. And within it came images, soft-edged memories of emperors before him, walking the same garden, listening to the same silence, and learning the same lesson. That stillness was not the absence of action, but the deepest kind of movement, a turning inward, a letting go. When Lian awoke, the bell was gone. In its place was a bowl, carved from obsidian, filled with water that glowed faintly. At the center of the bowl floated a petal he had never seen before. It shimmered between colors, never resting on one blue, then rose, then gold. He dipped a finger into the water. It was cool and sweet. He drank, and it tasted like silence. He returned to the surface with the bowl in hand. Junhai met him with a single nod and said, "Now you carry the final note." From that day forward, the elixir changed. It was never mentioned, but those who drank it, whether royal advisor or gardener, slept differently. Their breaths were deeper, their faces calmer, and some, on waking, wept without knowing why. Lian said little, but he began a new ritual. Once a month, when the moon was hidden, he would sit beneath the garden's plum trees and remain still for hours. His people began doing the same, pausing not for prayer, not for duty, but for stillness. It became known as the quiet hour. Shops would close. Markets would pause. Children would be gathered in gardens, where they sat with their parents in silence, listening not for bells, but for what lay beneath noise. Years passed, and the people of the kingdom grew gentler. Arguments were fewer. Laughter came more easily. Even storms seemed to pass more softly across the hills. And though few knew of the garden, or the bell, or the shimmer petal that changed the potion, they all carried its stillness, like a thread woven into their breath. The emperor still walked alone most nights, but now the silence walked with him. And in that silence, the empire dreamed not just in sleep, but in life. There was a part of the palace no one visited after dusk, a quiet hallway that curved like a whisper, lined with frosted glass panels and tapestries faded by centuries of moonlight. Even the guards avoided it, stepping lightly when passing by, as though their boots might wake something sleeping beneath the stones. This hall was called the Path of Forgotten Light. It had no torches, no lanterns on its walls, only small iron hooks long emptied of their flames. A corridor ended at a door wrapped in ivy, even though no sunlight reached it. Ivy that grew from stone, slow and silent, curling like a long-held breath. Behind that door lived a man few remembered. Some said he had once been an inventor. Others said he was a failed monk. Most didn't know he was still alive. But Emperor Lian had heard of him, the lantern keeper, and he had dreamed of him now, 3 nights in a row. In those dreams, a man sat at a table made of driftwood, surrounded by lanterns of every shape and size. None were lit, yet Lian could see every detail of the room, each curve of glass, each thread of spider silk, each page of the open book on the table. In the dream, light came from nowhere and everywhere, and the keeper looked up with eyes that shimmered like oil on water. He said only one thing each night, asterisk, not all light burns. So on the 4th morning, the emperor followed the dream. He walked the corridor barefoot, as if sound itself might be disturbed. The ivy-clad door gave way at his touch with no resistance, as if it had always been waiting. Inside, the air was cool and sweet. It smelled of wax and ash and lavender. The room was small, octagonal, with shelves climbing the walls, filled with lanterns made of stone, shell, crystal, and things Lian could not name. Some looked centuries old, others impossibly delicate. They all shimmered softly, even without flame. In the center sat a man, just as in the dream. He was not old nor young. His hair was silver, but his posture was relaxed. His face bore no lines of age, yet his hands were calloused with time. He looked up and smiled. "You've come late," he said, "but still early enough." Lian said nothing, and instead bowed deeply. The lantern keeper gestured for him to sit. "I dreamed of you," Lian said softly. "Good," the man replied. "Then you've been listening." "To what?" "To the dark that isn't darkness. The quiet that isn't empty. The light that doesn't ask to be seen." Lian leaned forward. "What is this place?" The keeper turned and lifted a lantern made of smoky quartz. "This is where all the dreams that never burn out are kept. Not remembered by name, but by feeling. You have passed through silence. You have walked with the bell. Now you must learn to carry light not to reveal, but to hold." He set the lantern between them. Inside it was no flame, yet a soft glow pulsed there, like a thought not yet spoken. "This," said the keeper, "is called heartlight. It glows without fire. It glows because it remembers. Someone once dreamed so gently, with such care, that it became light, and the light asked to stay." Lean sat with that sentence for a long time. Then he asked, "Why me?" The keeper smiled. "Because you no longer ask how. You ask why. And that is the beginning of glow." They sat together for hours. The keeper showed him lanterns made from folded memories. One was shaped from a mother's lullaby, another from the last words of a poet before sleep. One glowed with the warmth of a child's breath as they leaned against their grandfather's shoulder. Each one held a piece of peace. The keeper told Lian that the final step of the sleep elixir was not something you brewed. It was something you carried. A light that stayed with you through waking hours, soft and invisible, but strong enough to guide even the most restless hearts. "People think sleep is for the body," the keeper said. "But true sleep is when the heart finds its light again." He handed Lian a small lantern, shaped like a teardrop, carved from rose-colored glass. "This is yours. It was born the first time you gave silence to someone who needed it." Lian stared at it. The glow was gentle, like candlelight seen through rain. "What do I do with it?" he asked. "Keep it near you," said the keeper. "Not to use, not to show, just to remember." That night, Lian placed the lantern beside his bed. He didn't light it. He didn't need to. And as he drifted into sleep, he felt the glow hum quietly beside him, like the purr of a sleeping cat. His dreams were soft, full of blurred colors and open doors, of hands held and rooms filled with silence. He dreamed of villagers carrying invisible lanterns through forests that once frightened them, now calm. Of children sleeping beside glowing petals. Of winds that laughed and rivers that whispered lullabies. In one dream, he walked through a village with no name, and every home had a lantern on its roof, glowing faintly. The people there looked up at him, and they didn't bow. They simply smiled, as if they recognized him, not as emperor, but as one who had remembered how to carry quiet. After the visit with the lantern keeper, Emperor Lian began to walk slower through the palace, not out of weariness, but out of reverence. He treated each corridor like a river, each room like a forest, each servant's passing glance like a breeze worth noticing. He no longer needed to speak to command attention. People felt his presence the way one feels a shift in air before rain. And yet, Lian still felt that something was unfinished. The Sleep Elixir had taught him the way to stillness. The village of Maxiong had reminded him of dreams. The garden beneath the palace had gifted him silence. The lantern keeper had shown him how to carry light. But one final thread remained untied, one that pulled gently at his thoughts in quiet moments. He could feel it most clearly at dawn, when the world was neither night nor day. The moment when dew clung to every leaf like pearls of breath. He often stood at the palace gate, watching the horizon bloom, and wondered where that feeling came from. It was not longing, it was invitation. One morning, Jinhai appeared beside him, hands folded, gaze serene. "You feel it, don't you?" the old man asked. Lian nodded slowly. "But I don't yet know what it is." Jinhai looked toward the far hills, where mist curled like sleepy dragons. "It's time," he said, "for the orchard." Lian turned, puzzled. "There's no orchard in the palace." "There is," said Jinhai, "but only the sleepers may enter." They walked beyond the usual gardens, beyond the old stone walls that marked the edge of the inner palace, past the pools where lily drifted and cranes stood like statues. Beyond the final gate, hidden behind a curtain of hanging wisteria, was a narrow path barely visible, woven with roots and scattered petals. Lian followed. The air grew cooler, softer, as if even sound had wrapped itself in wool. At the end of the path, the orchard appeared not suddenly, but gradually, as though it had always been there, and the eye was only now remembering it. It was unlike any orchard Lian had seen. The trees stood in perfect stillness. Each bore fruit of strange shapes and colors, pearlescent orbs, translucent ovals, soft cubes that pulsed with faint light. Some fruits glowed faintly, others shimmered when touched by wind. The trunks of the trees were smooth and warm to the touch, and their leaves rustled like sighs spoken by the earth. But it was not the trees that held his gaze. It was the people. All across the orchard, beneath the trees, lay dreamers, sleeping peacefully, some old, some young, some curled beneath branches, some leaning gently against trunks, some resting with one hand touching the earth. None of them stirred. None of them seemed disturbed by the presence of others. Jinhai led Lian between the trees, careful not to step too hard. "These," he whispered, "are those who came before, those who drank the elixir for more than rest. They drank it to learn, to remember, to listen." Lian looked down at a young woman sleeping with her hand open, fingers relaxed, as if she had just let go of a thought. "Are they dreaming?" he asked. Junhai nodded. "Yes, but not just for themselves. They are part of a larger dream now. The orchard itself holds them." They came to a tree that bore no fruit. Its branches reached high, its trunk pale as moonstone. Beneath it, a woven mat waited. "For you," said Jinhai, "but only if you are ready to dream, not only as an emperor, but as one who has forgotten the crown." Lian said nothing. He sat, cross-legged, barefoot. He placed his lantern on the ground beside him and breathed. For a long while, nothing changed. Birds chirped in the distance. Wind played in the canopy. Somewhere, a petal fell without sound. And then, Lian began to dream. He saw no visions. He heard no voices, but he felt the orchard. He felt the roots of the trees stretching into the earth like fingers searching for old stories. He felt the dreams of others drifting into him, not as images, but as emotions. The calm of a child's sleep, the forgiveness of a father long gone, the courage of someone who faced the dark and whispered thank you. Hours passed, or maybe years. In dreams, time wears a different robe. When Lian awoke, the tree above him bore its first fruit. It glowed softly, like the lantern light at the foot of his bed. Junhai smiled. "You've given your first dream back to the orchard." Lian plucked the fruit gently. It was warm in his hand. He did not eat it. Instead, he carried it back to the palace and placed it in a glass bowl near the window where the children of the court often sat to play. That evening, a quiet boy with sad eyes picked it up. He held it for a long time, said nothing, and fell asleep beside the window. When his nurse found him hours later, he was smiling. That same night, a new idea came to Lian. A simple idea to build a smaller orchard, not in secret, but beside the palace gardens, where anyone's servants, cooks, children, guards could sit beneath a tree and listen to the hush of leaves. And so, the sleeper's orchard was born. No one was asked to visit, but every day someone did. And every night, a little more of the empire dreamed. Not just because of potions. But because peace had begun to root itself in the soil of daily life. And the orchard listened, and grew. Years passed gently. The empire blossomed not in grandeur, but in quiet. Markets bustled with kindness. Rivers ran clearer. And in the hush of night, more windows flickered with soft light as people sat beside their own cups of calming tea, waiting for dreams like dear old friends. The sleep elixir, now brewed with hush leaf and orchard fruit, had spread through the kingdom not as medicine, but as ritual. Its recipe was shared not on scrolls, but in whispers, passed from hands that stirred with care to hands that listened with stillness. People no longer asked how to fall asleep. They asked how to dream gently. In this age of hush. The emperor's library grew. Not with histories or decrees, but with listening. There was an entire wing now for dream scrolls, some written in languages no longer spoken aloud, some written backward, some so faint they could only be read by candlelight reflected on still water. And then, one day, a new scroll arrived. It came not from a scholar or a scribe, but from a child, a girl no older than 7, whose grandmother had once served in the Vaha palace kitchens. A girl said she had dreamed of a tree that opened like a book and told her its name. When she woke, she found a scroll beneath her pillow, sealed with wax shaped like a sleeping moon. She gave it to a royal courier who, unsure what else to do, brought it to the emperor. Lian examined the scroll. It was made of leaf fiber, soft and green-tinted, with writing that shimmered and shifted if stared at too long. The words seemed to drift when the scroll was still, and stayed still when the scroll was turned. It was titled in quiet ink, ****, the book that can only be read asleep. ***, intrigued, Lian prepared a mat in the quiet garden, surrounded by birdsong and wind. He lay beside the scroll and let himself drift into sleep. And there, in the softness of slumber, the book unfolded, not like a paper tome, but like a memory. A voice greeted him, not his own. Not Jinhai's, not the keeper's. It was a new voice, soft, young, and clear. "Hello," it said. ***, This is the book of dreams made by those who do not write with ink, but with breath. You may read now, because you have remembered how to sleep not for rest, but for return. Lian listened. And the book continued, not in words, but in sensations. He felt the cool touch of a river at night. He saw the smile of someone he loved. Long ago, though he couldn't recall their name, he heard a lullaby with no melody, just rhythm and breath. He watched leaves fall upward into a sky made of silk. He wandered a village, where every doorway led to a different emotion, and each one welcomed him without question. He understood, in that moment, that some stories were not meant to be told while awake, because they spoke not to the mind, but to the quiet part beneath it. When he woke, the scroll had vanished. In its place was a small blue feather, soft and warm, as though it had just fallen from a sleeping bird's wing. He kept the feather, placed it between 2 pages of his private journal, where he recorded the dreams too soft for speech. Soon after, the story of the sleeping scroll spread, and more people began to listen to their dreams with the same attention they once gave to books. They kept journals beside their beds, not to analyze or explain, but to witness. To remember that dreams are not nonsense, but another kind of language. Lian declared a day of stillness each season, a day when people would nap, rest, or simply lie beneath trees, giving space for dreams to rise, not as escape, but as a way of coming home. On one of those quiet days, a boy in a fishing village dreamed of a glowing fish who taught him how to soothe his crying sister. A baker dreamed of a field of salt that turned to sugar when she forgave herself. An elder dreamed of an apology from a friend who had long since passed, and when he awoke, his chest felt lighter than it had in decades. Dreams became the empires. Second language. Not always understood, but always honored. Lian himself continued to write, but now he used sleep as his ink. He'd nap in the orchard, or beneath the plum trees, and when he woke, a phrase would bloom in his mind like a blossom on warm stone. Asterisk, some lights are only seen with closed eyes. Asterisk, asterisk, the deepest part of you is not asleep. It is listening. Asterisk, asterisk, forgiveness sometimes arrives on a cloud shaped like a story. Asterisk, he never published these words. He whispered them into the wind and let the world carry them where they were needed. The years passed as gently as petals falling onto still water. Seasons came and went without hurry. The trees of the sleeper's orchard grew taller. Their fruits ripened more slowly now, as if they had learned patience from the dreams of those who rested beneath them. And Emperor Lian, though his face had gathered the faintest folds of time, never seemed aged. His voice remained steady. His steps remained soft, but his eyes had grown deeper like pools that had seen moonlight fall and rise 1,000 times. He had become a quiet part of the land itself. The people no longer bowed with grandeur. They bowed with warmth, with familiarity, as if to someone who had once helped them fall asleep during a restless night. Children knew his name not as a ruler, but as a dreamer, and his story was no longer told in halls of power, but in the corners of bedsheets, whispered by parents to calm their little ones. And yet, even the calmest stream must one day pass its course. Lane knew his time as the dream keeper would one day end not with a fanfare, but with a sigh, and so he began to look quietly for the one who would inherit not the crown, but the hush. There were many candidates. Advisors suggested scholars, diplomats, even distant royal kin. But Lian was not searching for cleverness or charm. He watched instead for stillness, for those who paused before speaking, who looked up when the wind changed, who listened with their whole being. And one day, while walking along the orchard's edge, Lian found her. A young gardener. No title, no education in courts, no family of note. Her name was Rin. She watered the hush leaf with both hands. Her sleeves rolled, her hair pinned in a simple knot. and as she moved, she hummed a tune no one had taught her rhythm, so soft it blended with the rustling leaves. Lian did not speak right away. He sat on a nearby bench and watched Dot. She tended to each plant as if it were an old friend, never rushing, never skipping. She paused to watch ants move across stone, gently redirected a spider's web from the path, and laid a fallen blossom back on a branch, even though it could not stay. He returned each day for a week, not always silent, always observing, and she never once acknowledged him, not out of disrespect, but because she did not need to prove. She belonged. She was already listening. On the 7th day, he spoke. You hum as if the garden sings through you. Rin looked up, eyes gentle. I only hum what I hear. What do you hear now? Lian asked. She tilted her head, smiled softly, and said, You are ready to rest. He laughed quietly, and in that moment, he knew. He invited her to walk with him the next day, through the garden of bells, past the lantern keeper's hall, into the orchard of sleepers. She did not flinch, did not rush, and when he showed her the shimmerfruit tree, she knelt and laid her palm on the roots. The tree sighed. That evening, she brewed a cup of sleep elixir for the Emperor. He drank it without speaking Dot and slept deeper than he had in years. His dream was simple. Rin, standing in moonlight, whispering to a branch, and the branch responding. When he woke, he gave her no crown. He gave her a satchel. Inside it, a single hush-leaf blossom, a folded parchment of garden, notes, a smooth stone from the orchard, and a lantern carved from pale wood. You will not rule, he said. You will remember. She nodded Dot, and that night, the Empire slept more soundly than ever before. No proclamation was made, Dot no festival declared. But in the days that followed, people began to find small tokens left in their rooms, pressed flowers, short verses dream, scrolls written in neat, quiet hand. A child found a phrase beneath her pillow. Asterisk, you are already the stillness you seek. A baker discovered a folded page in his flour tin. Flour can rise, but so can hearts. Asterisk, and in every token, a new voice spoke, different from Lian's, but carrying the same hush. Dot. The Empire had not lost its dreamer Dot. It had simply grown another Dot. As for Lian, he returned to the orchard more often now, not to rule, not to teach, but to sleep. Dot, and listen. Dot. The petals drifted down like memories. Dot. The wind curled softly through the trees, and the hushlight beside him flickered gently, warm and endless. The sky was pale the morning the dreaming tree began to bloom. Dot. Not the shimmerfruit, nor the hush leaf, nor even the orchard trees born from lantern light and sleep, but a tree older than any map or memory, standing alone at the farthest edge of the Emperor's land, where mountains grew quiet and wind no longer wandered, where silence had weight and the air held no questions. Dot. No. One had planted the tree. Dot. No one remembered when it first appeared. Dot. It simply was. Tall, with bark like soft stone and leaves shaped like crescent moons. It bore no fruit. It offered no shade. And yet, those who stood beneath it often forgot what time it was, or what day it had been when they arrived. Lian had visited once, years ago. Dot. When he was still learning the potion's ingredients, still dreaming of Mixiang, still wondering why the bell rang only once. He had stood beneath the dreaming tree for a single hour, and afterward could not speak for 3 days, not because he was afraid, but because his words were still catching up to what he had felt. Now, he returned. Dot. With Rin beside him, the girl turned gardener, who had become something more. Dot. No title suited her. Not apprentice. Dot. Not successor. Not sage. Dot. She was simply Rin. Dot. And now, together, they stood beneath the dreaming tree. Its branches swayed, though. There was no wind, and for the first time in Lian's life, it had bloomed. Not in color, but in sound. From its limbs came a low hum like a lullaby, sung in a language older than thought. The flowers were pale, translucent, like whispers pressed into petals. Each one seemed to quiver with memory. And as they fell, they dissolved before touching the ground. Rin caught one in her hand. It didn't vanish. Instead, it became ink, dark, soft, and warm. She looked at Lian. And he understood. They began to dig, not as laborers, but as seekers. And beneath the dreaming tree, they found a stair, a spiral of stone, untouched by weather. Down they went, into the heart of the mountain. The air grew cooler, the hush more complete. At the bottom, a door. It opened not with key nor command, but with quiet. And beyond it lay the archive beneath the dreaming tree. It was not built, but grown. Walls of woven root, shelves of petrified leaves, scrolls folded into flowers, books carved into branches, stories drifting through the air like perfume. It was not a library. It was a forest of memory. A place where all the dreams ever whispered during sleep had rooted, bloomed, and become stillness. Lian walked slowly between the shelves. He did not touch anything, but everything touched him. He felt dreams that had never been spoken, an old sailor's wish for calm waters, a child's prayer for a second hug, a widow's dream of dancing one more time in the rain. All here, all alive. He turned to Rin. She stood with her hand on a low shelf, where a tiny seed of light pulsed gently. She looked at him. He's here, she said. Lian didn't need to ask who. His father. Man he had known only briefly. Stern and proud, never cruel, but never still. A man who had ruled without ever truly sleeping. Lian reached toward the light. As his fingers touched it, a warmth ran up his arm, slow, kind, knowing. And then a vision of his father, not in armor, not on a throne, but sitting beneath the dreaming tree with tears on his cheeks. Alone, young, fragile, a boy wearing a crown too, large for his soul. And Lian understood. The silence he had grown to love was the very thing his father had feared, because in stillness, one sees everything, including oneself. The vision passed. The light dimmed. And Rin gently placed a new scroll on the shelf beside it, a fresh one, written in her own hand, the story of a child born from the orchard, raised by hush, trained by silence, and gifted with the ability to hear stories that had no words. When they emerged from the archive, the sun was setting. The dreaming tree had shed its final bloom, and the hum had faded. They sat beneath its trunk, side by side, not as teacher and student, not as emperor and heir, but as two people who had listened, deeply enough to stop needing to speak. The land stretched before them. Soft hills, sleeping, villages, gardens and scrolls and quiet hearts, all wrapped in dusk. All breathing slow. And in that moment, the dream of the empire was no longer something Lian held. It was something he belonged to hush. Like the tree, like sleep itself. The morning came quietly, not with fanfare or color, but with mist, the kind that lays soft over rooftops and smooths the edges of the world. Birds did not sing, bells did not ring. Even the palace fountains trickled with gentler rhythm. The emperor awoke slowly, as he always did now, no longer from need, but from readiness. He sat by the open window, wrapped in a robe of gray silk, and watched the clouds roll over the orchard like blankets being folded by the sky. In the corner of his chamber, the soft lantern still glowed, dim and steady, like a loyal breath. Rin entered without knocking. She carried 2 cups. One was made of moon-fired porcelain, the other of carved wood. Both were warm. She set them down, then sat beside him. No words passed between them. They listened together, sipping from their cups, letting the hush settle around them Like an old friend returned Dot. It was time. Not for endings, but for a changing of light. Lian stood. He walked to the orchard, barefoot, as he had done on his first night among them all. Shimmer fruit. The trees bowed in windless silence. The petals swirled without breeze. Dot, and beneath the tallest tree, the one that had bloomed when he gave his first dream back, he laid down a folded cloth. Dot inside. It, the last fruit he had harvested. He did not eat it. He returned it to the roots, a circle complete. From his pocket, he drew a small slip of paper, curled at the edges from time. Upon it, a phrase. Asterisk, some dreams don't end. They simply learn to walk with open eyes. Asterisk, he pressed it into the soil, with the same care one gives to planting a seed. Then he turned to R.I. and Dot. She did not smile, nor weep. Dot, she simply placed her palm over her heart, and nodded. Dot, a gesture of knowing. A gesture of yes. Dot. Lian smiled, and walked into the sleeper's orchard. Toward the center grove, where the most ancient trees grew. He did not look back. He passed the shimmer beetle tree. He passed the dreaming mat beneath the silver-barked branches. He passed the spot where he had first listened to someone else's dreams, and learned the shape of his own. And when he reached the clearing beneath the sky, he laid himself down. The ground was soft. The earth warm, the hush deep. He closed his eyes. Not to escape, not to disappear, but to join. His breathing slowed, like ripples, fading from a once-thrown stone, like footsteps becoming silence. And in his final dream, there was only light, not bright, not sharp, but soft, like a memory returning home. And so the sleep elixir remains, not just in jars and scrolls and orchards, but in hands that stir slowly. In lips that whisper instead of speak. In dreams that hold space for others. In the hush between words. And in every quiet heart that has ever sat beside the window and wondered how to fall not just asleep, but inward and gently and whole. The emperor no longer walks the palace, but some say on misty mornings. A soft breeze carries his voice through the plum trees, not speaking, just breathing. Like a lullaby that has forgotten it needs words. And somewhere beneath the dreaming tree, a new scroll blooms, waiting to be dreamed. By you.